Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
This is episode 16 of the Flixwatcher podcast. Welcome, guys. I'm Kobe.
And I'm still Helen.
On this episode of Flixwatcher, we'll be talking about Under the Skin, the Jonathan Glazer-directed, Scarlett Johansson starring vehicle about an alien being that comes down and preys on vulnerable men. On IMDb score for Under the Skin was 6.3 out of 10. The Rotten Tomatoes score is 85%, but guys, stay tuned, of course, for the only scores that matter, which is a Flixwatcher rating.
We are, of course, on iTunes, where you can subscribe and leave us a lovely review. You can also find us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod. Come say hi, give us a tweet, and visit the website flixwatcher.tv for full listings of each episode. As always, films reviewed in this podcast were available to stream on Netflix UK at the time of recording. There may be bad language, and there may be spoilers. You have been warned. Hello and welcome to this edition of Flixwatcher podcast. Today we are going to start a little bit differently. We have been enjoying the reviews that you've been leaving us on iTunes, and we wanted to share some of the favourite ones with you. So we have from Get Lewis, who describes the show as enlightening and who is a very happy panda. Not sure whether he is an actual panda, but this panda is very happy. Another one we enjoyed was from Gerbera for You, who described it as being an absolute for the movie buff. Thank you for that one. And this is another one from Jimmy Uncle Diddy Bebo, who described it as witty and engaging host with fantastic guests. So this leads us on to our guests that we have with us today. We've got Will and Joe. Do you want to say hello and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Will, so I'm the editor-in-chief of Exploding Helicopter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm a contributor to the podcast and the website as well.
And if you've not come across Exploding Helicopter, it's a website and podcast dedicated to celebrating my favourite movie trope of all time, which is exploding helicopters. And might not be something you've thought about a lot, but once you start noticing helicopters in films, you start noticing that they explode an awful lot of the time, often in some very strange, weird and wonderful ways. So on the website and on the podcast, we take a look at a different film and spend a bit of time dissecting the helicopter explosion on offer. So yeah, if you're interested, come and check it out.
And how did you twig onto this fact, this phenomenon, as it were, in film, that helicopters explode at an alarming rate, and why did you start recording it?
So it was a friend of mine. I was watching a really cheap RoboCop, a straight-to-DVD rip-off called Cyborg Cop. And my friend just said, you know, this helicopter hoved into view, and my friend just said, I bet that is going to explode in any minute. And sure enough, it did explode. And that just planted a seed in my mind. And then I was kind of just looking for a new sort of website, blog type project to do. So I decided, right, I am going to catalogue this phenomena. And yeah, been doing it for like the last 8 years.
do you have an ultimate or favourite exploding helicopter? Is there one that stands out as being the best?
There are all sorts of different exploding helicopters that I really love. I'll just mention a couple that I really particularly like. I really like the one in Rambo 3 at the very end of the film, where Sylvester Stallone is in a tank and he goes up against this crazed Russian general who's in this massive, great helicopter, and they just charge at each other, obviously the helicopter in the sky, tank along the ground, they just collide into each other in this big epic fireball. It's totally ridiculous, totally over the top. But in terms of really odd exploding helicopters you can check out the comedy film The Other Guys, where you can see Will Ferrell down a helicopter using golf balls that he's firing at it from a driving range. So yeah, very over the top one in the Rambo 3 and a very bizarre one in The Other Guys.
You'd be surprised at how frequently there are surprisingly unique ways of destroying a helicopter, which I think the podcast and reviews sort of capture quite well.
Well, we'll talk about, we'll certainly link to your guys' blog and the podcast. That's in the show notes.
Yes, we will.
So we're here today to talk about Under the Skin, which is chosen by yourself, Will. Do you want to tell us why you chose it, and if you can, give us a synopsis of the film?
Sure. So Under the Skin came out in 2014, and it was written and directed by Jonathan Glazer, who's perhaps best known for Sexy Beast. And the film stars Scarlett Johansson as this mysterious alien creature who cruises the streets of Glasgow preying on men. And we first meet her character as she's sort of born or created, and we then begin to experience the world through her eyes. This film is quite hard to explain, as there's very little plot and next to no exposition in it. So there's no hand-holding for the viewer here. But essentially what happens is that Scarlett's character moves through the film from being this cold-blooded, emotionless predator to one that starts to develop some sort of consciousness or humanity. And the reason I picked this film is actually because I did a massive U-turn on it. I saw it in the cinema when it first came out, and I really didn't think a lot of it. I thought it was pretentious. I thought it was style over substance. But I often do this bizarrely with films I dislike. I often give them a second go. And actually, on the rewatch, I completely did a U-turn on it. And I actually think it's a really good film. So the reason I picked it was because I wanted to perhaps try and convince people who'd written it off on a first viewing to go back, give it another go, or to encourage people who haven't seen it to go and watch it and hopefully try and recognize the film's strengths on that first viewing and not be perhaps put off by some of its more sort of obtuse or avant-garde elements.
What are your thoughts, Joe?
I agree with Will about the giving it a second chance, I suppose. When Will picked this film, I wasn't particularly thrilled at all. I think, I'm not sure whether it was the time that I watched it. I didn't see it in the cinemas at all. I think the first time that I saw it was on Netflix, and I think it must have either been, I don't know, the state of inebriation at the time or the time of night that I watched it, but I found it a really difficult watch. And rewatching it this time for the second time, I think I gained a bit more of an appreciation for what it was trying to be. And I think your point about style over substance was certainly what I thought initially. And it is a very peculiar film. And I think it's quite a unique film, though. And there are certain aspects that I think I noticed a bit more the second time on the rewatch that I quite enjoyed that weren't really apparent on the first.
Can you give us any examples?
I think the point about there being virtually no dialogue. I mean, it's so much of the film is sort of implied, intimated, and hinted through a lot of the gestures that you see. And of what dialogue there is, I think like 90% of it must be like directions around the city of Glasgow. And
It mentions Asda a lot.
Asda a lot. The M8 never had so many mentions in the film. And whilst I think I found that initially sort of quite difficult in terms of engaging with the film, I think this time around, where I was maybe a bit more concentrated and like knew what the film was, and so it made it certainly a bit easier rewatching it this time to actually enjoy it. Though I still maintain that it's not one of my favourites.
Well, we'll get to the scoring shortly. But when you're talking about the dialogue, one of the things I knew about this film before watching it the first time. Has everyone here seen it? Is this the second time everyone here has seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it'll be a good comparison anyway. But the main thing I knew about this before watching it the first time was that a lot of the dialogue it wasn't improvised, but it was with people who were unwitting participants in it. And I couldn't actually tell the difference between who was an actor in it and who was actually just an off the street kind of.
And didn't realise they were talking to Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought that was quite cool.
There's quite a sort of contrast between, I suppose, those scenes where it looks as though it's really realistic because, I mean, they are filming real people in that. And then that contrasts very heavily with the moments where you see Scarlett Johansson go into her home, and it's very clearly a very different world within that very, very dark, very black, very reflective space. It sort of looks much more like it's the work of the music video director than sort of the real sort of sense that you get from the other aspects of the film. But,
so when you say music video director, that's what Jonathan Glazer's perhaps best known as, isn't
indeed.
He? Yeah. Because I didn't know much about it. I knew he did Sexy Beast, and then I did a bit of research on this before coming in here, and I was like, he's actually behind a lot of the best music videos from the 90s. Like the Virtual Insanity, Jamiroquai video is behind that.
We'll forgive him for that one.
Sorry? Oh, wow.
I think he's done
like
big
that
adverts for Guinness and definitely Guinness, maybe like Nike as well. I can't remember, but yeah, he's done a lot of adverts as well as videos, and I think that's partly fed into my initial impression of just wanting to kind of perhaps write this film off as style over substance, because here's somebody who's, the film looks, I think, fantastic, but what is the story here? What's the narrative? And I just thought, this is typical. This is what happens when you let commercial directors make a feature film. They've got no idea about how to actually tell a story.
Helen?
It's an odd film. It's definitely a very, very strange film, but it's also very stylized and weirdly beautiful, very interesting, and Scarlett Johansson in it is incredible. She's just this kind of strange alien being walking through, even when she's just walking through the town, you can just tell that even though she's sort of dressed down from what we normally expect of her, she's still this completely unique being in this world that is not made for her. And there's just so many things that I noticed the second time round that I'd kind of got caught up in the weirdness and trying to work out what was going on in the first time round that I didn't pick up on or I'd completely forgotten. Like there's a bit much later on where she's trying to tap along to the music with her fingers and she can't quite do it, and she's trying to kind of settle into this world that is obviously never going to happen because she's so alien to it, but she's kind of trying but failing as well. So it's kind of weird and sad and just really odd.
And I think you've touched on one of the things which I can well imagine, certainly I got hung up on and bogged down on the first time viewing, is the more avant-garde aspects of the film, because the film opens with this very abstract sequence, and there's another one about sort of perhaps 2/3 of the way through the film. And I think, and there's also this recurring, and which Joe mentioned, this recurring room within the film, which seems to be something to do with Scarlett Johansson's inner world. I mean, it's not really clear. It's never explained. And I think it's very easy to get kind of hung up on those particular elements of the film, especially perhaps on a first-time watch. And actually, the thing that I've appreciated on the rewatch is those elements are not that important, and it's the details that you and that the finger tapping moment is a great example of Scarlett Johansson's kind of developing sort of humanity in the film. Those are the sort of things that actually are important, and I think those are the things to sort of focus on in terms of going in and watching this film and getting from it what there is.
Yeah, I think the less you try and explain it, and I think it's kind of, there's enough in it for you to sort of work out that, maybe she needs these men as kind of a food source, and because obviously when she moves away from this house later on, she becomes more vulnerable. So you could kind of see it as that. And the less you try and think of it in a narrative or in a linear way or in a way that makes sense, the more you can kind of enjoy it and look around it. I think was definitely the second time round. And she has a couple of relationships in it, and the one that she has with the guy with this disfigured face is one of the sort of, it's very strange but also quite tender and very, very human as well for this character who's very alien. And I think that's one of the more interesting moments in it as well, when she's sort of in the car with him for the first time.
Absolutely. And that moment of the film, I think that's the the bit where it pivots, I suppose, where there's a noticeable change in Scarlett Johansson's character, and I think is that the first of the people that are taken back to the room that is essentially, well, the one that is let loose, essentially, and it's off the back of that she then sort of, there's a noticeable character change, and she goes on the run from what her life is at that particular point in time.
Well, the guy on the motorbike.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The mysterious guy in the motorbike.
Yeah. This is quite an odd character following around. I mean, should we talk about the room kind of dark sequence? Because there's a lot of elements in this film which really add to how kind of striking it is. The black room, the music is kind of haunting and ever present, and
it's got
just,
good little...
the general kind of special effects of it are actually quite subtle, but really good.
It's like a little mating dance that they do. They kind of have like a little dance. There's kind of a little bit Twin Peaksy in the way that they do their dancing as well. It's kind of like they're not
the dwarf
they're
from
not
Twin
quite
Peaks.
dancing in time with the music, and it's all a little bit weird. But
You're putting quite a nice spin on being consumed into Scarlett Johansson's diesel sex dungeon.
I don't know what to say. The second time watching it, I think, like yourself, I could take a bit of a step back and just to kind of appreciate it. And the scenery was really nice. The scenery was just genuinely really nice. There's one point where you're looking over the beach and it's just set on. There's a fixed camera, and you could just see that kind of waves coming over, and there's like a mist that was just curling round over the beach, which just looked really cool. So I can see definitely why it was a style over substance kind of thing. How much I enjoyed this film, I'm not sure I would say I enjoyed it, but I was definitely intrigued by it.
I don't think it really wants you to enjoy it. I don't
Right.
think that's the purpose of it. I guess maybe it starts thinking about this idea of, being inside certain skins, and you could take so many different angles from it. I mean, one thing I watched it for the second time round was how different a character is. In the first half of the film, she's a very strong female character. She holds all the power. She manages to lure all these men back relatively easy into the diesel sex
Men
dungeon.
don't come off in this film very well,
No.
I don't think.
But then when she's out of kind of her comfort zone, when she's out into the wild and, with people that she can't control, or she's trying to fit in, then she becomes very vulnerable and things don't end well. So it's a really interesting film from a female character point of view, and kind of seeing a female who's really strong in this city environment, this urban environment, and then sort of falls apart as she goes out into the wild and into an environment that she can't control.
Because for me, I don't think this film is actually trying to tell a particular story. I think this film is really just trying to, it's something to experience rather than a story that is being told. So I think the great achievement of this film is to make our world look alien, or to present our world to you in a way as if you were an alien on this earth. So there's very subtle things, I think, within the way a lot of the shots mimic perhaps how you would see the world through if you were Scarlett Johansson sitting in this van, looking at people on the street. The way the sound design in this film, again, emphasizes that. So the way it's mixed, you kind of hear these sort of everyday street noises, but they're sort of pushed up a little bit in the mix. So you sort of hear them, these are all noises that you're really sort of familiar with, that you hear in everyday world, but you don't really listen to them. You just sort of tune them out. But here, they're sort of dialed back up, and it kind of forces you to sort of think, actually, if I'd never been on Earth before, this is what our world would sound like. And I think that, that is really what this film is mostly sort of trying to do, I think, in terms of, what would it be like to be an alien on this Earth? Obviously, an alien that needs to consume men on a frequent and regular basis, but there needs to be some sort of interesting narrative dynamic in it. So that's the one they've gone for.
There are a few quite shocking scenes in it. I think the most harrowing scene, and I remember the year I watched it as well, just the scene where the baby is left on the beach.
Yeah.
That was actually quite tough watching, I thought, in the cinema.
Such a cold sort of walking past, like, quite clearly distressed baby on the beach after, like, both parents have been washed away.
Because that was quite the whole kind of setup was quite terrible, because the dog gets washed away, so the lady goes in there, and then the husband follows, leaving the kid there, and you just kind of think, that's actually horrible. And you see Scarlett Johansson just stone-faced pulling her caught prey past the baby who's crying and screaming and yelling. And that shows that, like you said, Helen, that shows at that stage she is really not of this world at all. There's no one person who would go past a dead baby, not a dead baby, a crying baby who's alone and not even look in that direction, apart from that guy with the motorbike.
I agree. I think it's one of the best scenes in the film, and it definitely portrays that aspect of her personality that, she doesn't have all of these sort of, intuitive or learned relationships, or, it doesn't have any sort of empathy or sentimentality towards, other human beings, and why would she? She's not a human being. And I think that scene, absolutely nails it, as you're saying, because you've got these people, they're trying to rescue a dog. You've got this young child here. It's very, I think, very cleverly done to just sort of really ram that particular point home, but in a very sort of, without subtle and clever way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that even when you've seen it the first time around, you know it's coming. It's very stark, and obviously you've got this character a female character, so you kind of, you could almost imagine that in the wrong hands, this film could have been the turning point when she realizes that she does have emotion and she turns around and rescues the baby, and it could go down kind of a weird, strange path, but just to ignore the child completely. And then again, the story's brought up on the radio, and she's listening to it on the radio, and she just kind of doesn't really acknowledge the two particularly, or sort of link the two together, that's the family that they're being talked about and she was there, or anything like that. So it's a very brave thing for a director to do, really, to be that cold and heartless and kind of present it to you. And it's not like you see it briefly, it's there for quite a while and in the background. So I think it's quite a brave move.
Brave move for Scarlett Johansson as well, as an actor taking on board this role. I don't know how they got it made and off the ground.
Apparently took quite a while. I think Jonathan Glazer had been thinking about it for about 10 years, wasn't it? And yeah, I think I read that he had several conversations with Scarlett Johansson over that time, and it just sort of, they had to sort of ensure that it was the right time for everybody to do it. But I think it was quite a busy year for her as well, because I think there were a lot of similar. Well, there was one which was the Lucy that I'm thinking about, came out pretty much sort of around the same time, and
also she's well entrenched in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point as well.
Of course, yeah.
So her stock is high. So I think the combination of Scarlett, if this was a British actress of any other ilk, would have tied the two together. But Jonathan Glazer, who's not made many motion features, and Scarlett Johansson, who's perhaps one of the most highly powerful actors in the world at the moment, putting them together seems like an odd combination. So,
well, this film took about 10 or 15 years to get off the ground, and I think it went through various iterations on a script level. So it's based on a novel of the same name, but actually the story in this film is quite different from the one that is in the novel.
Okay,
and essentially, Glazer decided to kind of junk the approach of the novel and also some of the various previous script treatments, because I think at one time he was looking to make this with Brad Pitt in a relationship with another alien. They were kind of like living in a cottage in the Highlands, and that variant got.
I think that would have been a very different
terrible
film. Yeah. Sounds great, Will. We should have. That should have been the film.
We're all scoffing, but at the same time, it's like, how did this one get off the ground, but not one with Brad Pitt? That's fair.
But I think Gemma Arterton was apparently in the frame to make this at one point, but then.
So that's what I mean. That's a British actress who's got some good stock behind her. I could completely see this being a film that's made on a low budget with Gemma Arterton and Jonathan Glazer. Just the combination of those two, of Scarlett Johansson and him, it seems kind of, well, how do they do it? And bravo for getting off the ground. And yeah, good on
She's
them.
done a few sort of, Scarlett Johansson has looked to do some sort of more interesting sort of projects around the type of big budget genre fare like Lucy or the Marvel films as well. So I guess this perhaps fitted the bill of something that, she's done one for the mortgage and now I'm going to do one for myself.
Yeah. I mean, that classic one is the shit with Bill Murray.
Lost in Translation.
Yeah, where she has completely dialed. And I think that's where I took to her as an actress. I absolutely love Lost in Translation, even though I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head. But it does show that she has got that kind of range and willingness to dive out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, I think she's mesmerising this. I really do think that it's incredible, just the way that she is, especially in the sort of, the hidden cameras, the improvised moments when she's like genuinely speaking to these guys and they were sort of, oh, how are you? And things like that. And then kind of this really, really cold, soulless kind of luring them to their death. It is a remarkable performance, and saying she pretty much is the only person in it for the whole of the film, and there is hardly any dialogue. I mean, there's some bits where she hardly says anything, and it's some of those scenes, more enjoyable than a lot of films that I've watched where, that we'd imagine as being typical films.
It's a very pared down and minimal performance, and I think it's very easy to underestimate those types of performances because I think it's very easy to sort of say, well, they're not doing a lot, but that type of acting style is very easy to get wrong. And we've all seen in people in films, and you just think that person's awful. What are they? They can't act because they're not acting. And I think Bill Murray can sometimes be guilty of this. I think he can sometimes he can do very low key, and then it's just like, actually you're not acting anymore. You're just doing Bill Murray. You're just doing Bill Murray on a movie set. And as you're saying, I think Scarlett Johansson is absolutely fantastic in this film, and it is a very minimal performance. But I think all credit to her to actually make that compelling at the same time.
Well, I think another thing I remembered just now is that when I went into this, a lot of critics who I read said this is one of their favourite films of the year. So I was expecting something that was, I don't know if a run and mill, but I'm a big independent film fan, so I thought it was going to be of the ilk of Little Miss Sunshine or Juno type thing. So I wasn't expecting, even though they said it's about an alien who's preying on men, I didn't know what to expect. I wouldn't know how to explain.
You've got Species in your mind, haven't you?
That was a 90. Yeah, okay,
it's an
maybe
arty version of Species.
yeah, the artistic version. Yeah, that could be it.
I don't think definitely
that's
right.
the pitch, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
if you're in the studio executive boardroom.
And they definitely wrote with the art. This is kind of the new genre of art films. From if you're doing a genre studies, and this is kind of alternative cinema. This will be the new one with that. This will be. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I would have studied at university in film studies. This is something that would have been looked at. It's got that very stylized.
I wonder if that's a lucrative market for like residuals and royalty payments. Is if you can get onto the sixth form movie syllabus.
Get on the syllabus.
Yeah.
Watch the cash roll in.
Well, I think one person who's done really well at this is the lady who did the soundtrack.
Yeah,
Michael Levy.
The soundtrack's amazing.
Yeah,
it's
been Oscar nominated.
Well,
indeed, for Jackie.
For Jackie,
right?
Yeah. Has anyone seen Jackie here yet?
No, it's on my to watch list.
Yeah, it's going to be a heavy weekend, I think, for me to try and catch up with a lot of the films I'm missing out on. But it is haunting. But I don't think I could listen to it in isolation.
No, it's a really big part of the film, and I think certainly I noticed that much more on the second watch because there's so little dialogue. I think you sort of look to other things like musical cues to perhaps sort of guide you through the film, and I think there's certainly sort of at the beginning through the atmospheric opening, there's almost like an insect-like buzz about the strings in the background, and there are just those sort of three chords that are often repeated, sort of certainly when she's leading the gentleman to dinner. And no, I think it's much like the film in itself. It's understated but effective, I think.
Yeah. Well, I hope she wins. I don't know any of the soundtracks that have been nominated, so that's my only.
La La Land, probably.
Would they be songs though, wouldn't they?
It's nominated for everything, isn't it?
40 nominations, a bit too much.
I mean, I'm suspecting it's quite a different soundtrack to the one that's in this, but who knows?
Well, when I heard she was nominated, when I heard she had done the soundtrack for Jackie, I couldn't imagine what that would be like. So I look forward to seeing how many strings she has to her bow, as it were. I reckon we should go to
Let's do some scoring.
Should we do some scoring?
Yeah. So this is unique scoring system.
This is the part of the show I've been looking forward to the most.
Oh, sorry.
Let's really tie ourselves in knots over the scoring here.
So
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum, built for business by American Express.
we have, first up, is the recommendability score. So this is how likely you are to recommend this to someone out of 5. And you can have points if you can't decide on a full score. And you can have a 0 if you want.
Is it going to be a 0?
No.
Well, I would give the recommendability of this film, been dying to say that, but I'd probably give this a 2.
Oh, really?
Only because as much as I love it, I think I would only recommend it carefully to people because, you know, my dad would not get on well with this film. You know, he only watches films with ex-Navy SEALs, I don't know, trying to get revenge or something.
So your typical chopper fireball fare is the kind of thing you could recommend to your dad?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But, Under the Skin is not something. So I would be very careful in my recommendation. So I would probably only give it a 2 on that.
But of those people that you would recommend it to, would it be high?
Yes.
Okay.
I would be effusive. And there are people that I have been sort of recommended this film very highly to, but they're few and far between, sadly.
Okay.
I'm going to go slightly higher than Will with a 2.5.
Oh.
In that, I take Will's point about it being certainly something that not everybody will get on board with, and you probably have to recommend it carefully to people. But I think actually, I suspect that if there will be people that I would be surprised that would enjoy this, and I think even if they're not going to enjoy it, I would recommend that they watch it to see if actually it is something that they do like. Because certainly if you'd have asked me after the first viewing of this, we'd have had a very lower mark. So I think it is something that perhaps I don't even sort of maybe recommend to people that have seen it once and not enjoyed it to maybe rewatch it again off this experience.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it 4.
Wow.
Had I not seen it again, I probably would have been more along the kind of 2, 3. But now I just want to recommend it to people just to mess with them a little bit, really. And just kind of to see what reaction they get, because watching it again, I think it just is really, really interesting, and I still don't really know how I feel about it. And it's quite rare that I'll watch a film that really does stay with me, and I'm still like thinking about it and going, I'm still really not sure how I felt while I was watching it. And I think that's quite rare for films these days to have that effect. So yeah, 4, go and watch it, everyone.
I think I'll give it a 3. I think like Joe said, I'd like to have the discussion with people after they've watched it and see what they thought of it, because I think this discussion now and seeing it the second time is giving more kind of insight as to what happened. Like I think everyone else here has said that on the first viewing it's a bit of, well, actually, what the fuck is going on here? But then when you've seen it for the first time, you can take a step back and think, okay, so those things kind of dot together. And I don't think I got the first time that she was on the run from the guy on the motorbike, and I didn't get the fact that she kind of changed her outlook on life and she was gaining humanity. So for those reasons, I think it's a 3, but you should try and watch it again maybe a year later to try and see if you get more out of it. And I like you saying, well, there's some people who would definitely not get on with it at all, but I think I would sprinkle that recommendation a bit more freely than you would do. Repeat viewing score, I guess I would give this a 5, because I really get more out of it every time I watch it. And there's some things that have been said here that actually I was sort of, I hadn't noticed that, or I kind of perhaps hadn't given that as much thought. And yeah, this is a film that I get, I've rewatched it quite a number of times now. And how many times have you seen it now?
Perhaps this is my 4th or 5th viewing of it.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I'm still getting sort of like extra details out of it. So yeah, I think this is a film that continues to reward you if you continue to watch it.
What do you reckon, Joe?
I definitely think it's repeat viewing for people who've seen it the first time. Having seen it a second time, I'm not wholly desperate to see it a third or fourth time. So fair play, Will, for doing that. So I'd probably give it a 3.
I'm going to give it a 4. Again, I have seen it once before and got a lot more out of it the second time, with probably about a year in between. So I think probably I would watch it again. I'm not going to watch it this weekend or anything, but I think if it sort of came around again, or I was maybe with someone who hadn't seen it and they were looking for something to watch, then I'd probably quite like to watch it with them. Just kind of have that.
The devil in you.
Yeah. And they sit there and go, I don't understand what's going on. Yeah, so 4.
I think I'll give it a 3, and for half the reasons that Will was saying, half the reasons that you were saying, Joe, and that
You got to choose between us, Kobe.
well, I'm more on the Joe side, I think, by the score.
Oh, damn you.
I don't think I'm going to watch it again. I'm not going to rush to watch it, certainly. And if I do watch it again, I think I will be a distance of time. At least a year is going to pass before I watch it. But, and I also think there would have been some insight that someone's given me that spurs me to think, hold on, I need to watch that again to see those kind of things and pick them up. And it does require a repeat viewing, I think, to start to appreciate it. So I think it's important to note. If you watch it now for the first time, guys, give it a year and then watch it again and then review the score and come back to us. Let us know what you think. Small screen score.
So I'd give this a 4. I mean, I saw it in the cinema, and I've seen it on my TV at home, and I think it works perfectly well in those environments. So I'm happy to give it a good score.
Yeah, the special effects are good in this, but they're not showy, are they? So you don't need the IMAX screen to make the most out of it. Sure.
This might be the only point where we're in agreement, Will. I would also give it a 4, and I've not had the benefit of seeing it in the cinema, but there was nothing on this watch that I thought, you know what, I really regret not having seen this in the cinema. So I think it's certainly watchable on small screen.
I'm going to give it a 3. I watched it on like a DVD, so a normal size TV the first time around, and second time around I watched it on my computer, and I just sort of sat there all through the computer going, I really need to clean my computer screen. And I think I would quite like to see it on a big screen, especially more so for the sound. I think that'd be really good. I think if you've got the facility to hook it up to a bigger screen rather than your computer screen, I think it should be seen as big as you can in your home. So for that, a 3.
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah, I think the sound is probably the bigger thing for me than the actual visuals of it. And I kept on thinking I should get some either really good headphones so I can listen to it really, really well, or invest in a bigger house so I can put a better surround sound system in. But yeah, I think the sound is the most potent part of the potent loss, I guess, from watching it at home. I'm going to give it a 3. Engagement score.
Well, I was fully engaged. I really like this film. I'm a big fan of it, so I was fully engaged whilst I was watching this. So I'm going to give this probably a 4.5, maybe.
Oh, nice.
I think half scores are allowed, aren't they?
You can go however many decimal places you want to go. And
well, I'll keep it easy for you. Just
okay.
Go 4.5.
Well, I mean, your overall score is 3.875, so, And Joe?
I think I'd give it about 2.5. Whilst the second viewing was certainly more enjoyable than the first, I do think that there, certainly on the first viewing, there are problems with engagement in parts that, for a film that's only 108 minutes long, it does feel longer, or certainly, and I think it felt longer on both of those watches, despite the more positive feeling that I had on the second viewing. So I think there are some engagement problems, but I would encourage people to try and push through to try and sort of guard against the feeling of wanting to stop watching it, which people might have on first viewing, certainly.
So what's the score, sorry?
2.5.
2.5.
I mean, for me, both times I've watched it, you can't not for me, you can't not watch it, because it's so bizarre, and because you've got no idea what's going to happen next. So both times, even though I'd seen it before, the second time obviously was picking up on new things, I was still really, really engaged in it. But also thinking in the kind of home environment that if, 10 minutes, 20 minutes in, you're not really feeling it, you probably are going to switch off or, be distracted a little bit. So I'm going to give it a 4 for that one. But I could see easily that if I was watching it for the first time, maybe I might not have been so engaged. Because obviously this time watching it on Netflix, there's a bit more kind of freedom in sort of switching it off and things like that.
Yeah, I think I'm a 3 based on the 2 viewings. I've gone 3 across the board, haven't I? Well, there you go.
What does that average out at?
Average is out at 3. I think just towards the end, I was kind of waning a bit, and I did take the opportunity to head to the internet and find out maybe like a bit of what's going on and who did the soundtrack. So what? Because I remember that she was tied in with Jackie, Michael Levy, and wanted to know a bit more about Jonathan Glazer because I really could not remember anything he'd been in, and that's where I was like, oh shit, he was the guy behind Street Spirit Fade Out and Uncle and a lot of Jamiroquai stuff. So he did kind of power my 90s music vibe. So that gave me a bit more respect for the film, I guess. So had I been more engaged, I may not have done the research. So that gives us an overall score of 3.4 for Under the Skin, which I think,
it's pretty solid.
It's pretty solid,
for such a kind of odd film, I think it's fared quite well there.
Yeah.
But
It's not going to be to everyone's taste, so I think that's a good score for a film which is angling at probably a smaller niche than a lot of films.
So I think the reviews on IMDb were quite low for it. They're taking a lot of viewer scores, don't they? And The Guardian gave it 5 out of 5. So the critics kind of viewed it quite highly, but I think
it's currently hovering on the 2 at Netflix.
I was going to say it was when I went to the rewatch, it was 1 star, and I think I looked at it before and it was 2. So I'm assuming Will had got.
I've been on there. I think I gave it a 4 when I finished watching that. Yeah, just to bump it up a little.
Okay, well, 3.4 for Under the Skin. Well done, Jonathan Glazer and Scarlett Jo.
A new nickname for me.
Scojo. Guys, can you give us a quick rundown as to where you're from and how we can find you online before we close out the show?
So you can find Exploding Helicopter, the podcast. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Acast, we're on all kind of usual places that you find podcasts. If you want to check out the website, simplest thing to do is just type Exploding Helicopter into a search engine. We own Natural Search. No one else is writing about Exploding Helicopter, so you'll find us very easily. If you want to follow me on Twitter, then you can find us at Chopper Fireball.
Chopper Fireball. Fantastic.
Cheers.
Yourself,
Thank you very much.
All my work is on the aforementioned Chopper Fireball stuff.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Please don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes. And, of course, we want to big up Tony and Jay and also Greg, our editors from GL Productions. Of course, please big up Mighty People for the tunes you can hear now. And at the start of the podcast, find us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod and visit our website, flixwatcher.tv.